Okay, everybody ready? Places, please. Lights. Camera. And action.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Offstage. I am your host, Renee Jaworski, and tonight is kind of a treat for all of us, but also for me. When I went into the bio of our guest, I could not believe how many fascinating things he has undertaken in his career and what he's up to right now. I also want to ask him if he has access to more than 24 hours a day, because it seems like an octopus, he has a million things in the pot, all stirring at the same time. I have no idea how he has created as much impact as he has in his career already. But he's doing so many things that are intriguing to me and that are powerful, and he's getting a lot of impact throughout the entire globe. So I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to talk about everything from psychedelics to TV series creations to artist community hubs, all kinds of stuff, photography, arts collectives, you name it. This guy has done it, or is doing it right now, or is about to do it. He's a very inspiring person, and his name is Peter P. Clark. And I have all the links where you can follow him and check out all of the great work that he's working on. That'll be right here, so you can go follow him. We like to call it ethical stalking, here at the network. Check out all of the cool things he's doing. But we're going to bring him up right now and talk about it. Hello, Peter.
Hey there.
Hey, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, you do so much. It's so hard for me to know how to direct this because, like it says right there in your tagline, writer, director, series creator, you're doing so much stuff. And I thought there's 18 interviews to be had with Peter. If only I had 18 hours, we could start to cover it. I want to lead right out the gate, though, with Attic Studios, because everything that you're a founder of Attic Studios. This is an arts collective. I'll let you describe it a little bit more. But one of the reasons why I wanted to lead with this is that I'm a true believer in artists needing to collaborate with other artists and inspire one another. I was always inspired by Laurel Canyon and the amazing things that has come out of there. And I've always noticed that a lot of the greatest works of art came out of collectives and allowing different artists to have access to one another. So take me to the Queensborough Bridge, to the warehouse, and how this all got started with Attic Studios.
Sure. Well, it all got started back in 2010 in New York City, where I was pounding the pavement, looking for work as an actor. I had actually moved to New York in 1999, and I was involved with different theaters, different groups of artists and people, hanging out around Lower Manhattan, mostly putting on plays. And about 2 or 3 years before I decided to open Attic Studios is kind of when people started using small cameras that were designed mostly for photography to actually shoot really high quality video with interchangeable lenses. And all of a sudden everyone went from doing like off Broadway theater to making movies, short films. And this was before the phone was able to do what it is now. Right. So that's kind of how I got interested in that. Being interested in acting and theater, and then transitioning to filmmaking just was a natural step forward. At the time, I lived in a studio apartment in Manhattan, and like everyone else, I was screaming for space, looking for some, forgotten loft or warehouse somewhere that was going to charge me practically no money to just live there and make art all the time. Very quickly realized that just didn't exist in New York anymore. But I did stumble upon a really cool space in Long Island City, Queens, which many of your viewers might have heard of. It's actually not in Long Island. It's in Queens. It's just on the other side of the 59th Street Bridge. So it's very close to Manhattan. It's just 5 minutes in a cab. And I did manage to find a cool space there, which was a former printing facility, and made a quick deal because it was after the 2008 financial crisis. So
Oh,
there was
wow.
lots of available real estate in that particular area. And I did like a short-term lease, and with the idea of, okay, I'm gonna open up a little art space, and my friends and everybody were gonna get together and make theater and film. And
Mm-hmm.
the realities of the financial realities hit very quickly, and that's when I started renting it out to other people. The people I
Okay.
knew in my network, having kind of come up in not only acting but also in the photography world, which was my side job, my day job, which was driving vans and delivering equipment around the photo studios in Manhattan. So it was kind of a
Oh,
natural
interesting.
progression. Yeah, that's how I started
Yeah.
in that industry. And it was a natural progression. And so I knew some people, and we started, calling our friends and saying, hey, we've got this very raw loft space. Do you want to come shoot there? And that was the beginnings of Attic Studios. And we quickly started doing events and whatever we could do to keep the lights on. And that was going on 13 years ago now. So.
Yeah, and do you want to list some of the amazing talent that has been shot in Attic Studios or
Sure,
related to there? I
sure.
mean, some of
Well,
these names will blow people away. It's amazing.
yeah, I mean, we started out with just our friends and just people we knew that were looking for space to do portraits and small fashion shoots. Eventually, over time, we started acquiring a little client base, started buying equipment, camera equipment, strobe lighting, continuous lighting, grip equipment, and eventually we were able to start attracting bigger and bigger photography clients that were working mostly in fashion.
Right.
Eventually, we were able to offer competitive pricing versus the other studios in the city, and we were able to draw some of the biggest named photographers like Stephen Klein,
Hmm.
Craig McDean, Collier Shore, big names in the worlds of fashion and photography. And they love shooting with us because we're kind of outside of, we're
Right.
outside of Manhattan, we're more secluded, and the celebrities love it too because there's just less,
Right.
people around, and they can kind of let their hair down a little bit. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so they get to feel more authentic and maybe a little secure and protected.
Mhm.
That's just so great. Were you always interested in photography? How did you get interested in photography early on in your life?
So ironically, I'm not a photographer. I don't
Yeah,
really
that's what I'm trying to figure out. But
I
you're
don't
known
really
for this
shoot
now, but
stills. I do not shoot
right.
stills. I love photography. I
Hmm.
respect the craft. I know
Yes.
a lot about, the nuts and bolts of photography.
Hmm.
But, in recent years, photography and filmmaking have kind of started to melt together um, uh, because of obviously smartphones, internet, all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Hmm.
Everybody wants video now. So most of our clients, which are luxury brands and Fortune 500 companies that need to shoot content, they want both stills and also motion. So
Right.
yeah, my interest has always been in film, and I think that came from my interest in theater and
Hmm.
storytelling. Really, storytelling was always my primary interest. Even though photos do tell a story, I like I really love the multidisciplinary aspect of filmmaking, that it
Yeah.
incorporates music and theater and photography, and it's truly montage uh, artwork, which is why my company is called TAGE Films, or it's
Yeah.
actually short.
Taj films.
Actually, it's two meanings. It's montage TAGE Films, but it's also short for the Alliance of GoodTimes Entertainment.
Right. I was gonna ask you how to pronounce it. It's TAGE. And I said, is
TAGE
it
Films.
Taj or
Yes, yes,
Tage? Okay. Taj.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
montage. Montage. That's beautiful.
yeah.
It's an homage to montage. Yeah. I love that. You got to work with Annie Leibovitz?
I did actually. I worked very
Oh
closely
my
with Annie.
gosh.
Yeah, I worked with her for a while back before I opened Attic. I was
Wow.
one of her I was one of her technicians, and I worked with her. We traveled around the country together, and
What?
actually,
This is
actually,
crazy.
I actually worked on her book tours, which was very interesting. So I did video imaging for her book tours. I worked with her photo artists, and we went around the country and she did presentations and talks around the country, and I was there to make sure that whatever was on the screen that was 200 feet wide looked as close to what it would look like in the book. So
Yeah.
that
Oh
was
my gosh, that is so. Were you starstruck, or do you still get starstruck? And back then, were you, or to you, is it just normal that this is happening? You know that they're people. But I mean, Annie is such a legend. I feel like I would just clam up. But how did
you
that
know what
start with her?
I wasn't starstruck, but the people I worked with, the other people I
Yeah.
worked with in the industry were starstruck, and they were like, "Oh, you're working for Annie? That's so cool!" And I was like, "Yeah, like I knew she was a big name photographer. I knew she
Yes.
had shot all the famous celebrity portraits, and when I started going through her books, I was like, oh, and I started seeing all the famous photos of Whoopi Goldberg and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I know who she is. But like I said, I didn't come from a photo background, so I wasn't
Right.
so impressed. Although getting to know her a little bit and traveling with her, I was very impressed with her skill, obviously, and she taught me one really important lesson, which was, and this lesson I applied to dose the series, and I'm hoping to apply this to my other filmmaking. Is stay. She used to. People would always ask in these book tours. There'd be 2,000 people in a big auditorium, and someone would always ask this question, which is, they would say, I'm a young photographer. Where do I start? Where do I start shooting? And her advice was, shoot what you know, shoot what's close to your home and close to your heart.
There you go.
So when I started writing the script for Dose, I was like, well, what have I been kind of surrounded by in the last 10 years? And I had been working for Alex Gray, the famous visionary artist, who uses psychedelics in his craft of painting. And I had been doing some documentary work for him, and we were trying to work on several different projects with him to bring his artwork to cinema. And through that, I had become exposed to some of the organizations like MAPS, which the pilot is based on some of those people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So now let's segue into Dose, because this is really incredible, and you were inspired a little bit by Black Mirror, which I love. Black Mirror. Everybody loves Black Mirror. I mean, it's kind of like a more modern Twilight Zone in a way, but it breaks down all these barriers. So I suspect that Dose is going in that same direction, and actually even launching a little bit farther into the stratosphere. That's my guess, because psychedelics, and I read How to Change Your Mind, which I'm sure you've read, by Michael. I mean, it's an incredible book. That's what got me really interested. I'm so happy to see that the medical community and even Silicon Valley now is on board with microdosing, and it seems like the culture is finally getting ready for this. And so this is the perfect time for Dose. Talk a little bit about, with our audience, people who are still skeptical. Maybe they grew up in a certain era where this stuff was criminalized, or you think of somebody who's on the outside of culture, or somebody who's nefarious in some way. Talk a little bit about your experience with psychedelic culture and all of that, because I also want to talk a little bit about High Times and all of that later. You're working on a biopic too in your spare time, right? But anyway.
I mean, you mentioned,
so
people growing up in a criminalized world. I mean, it was criminalized for everybody for so long. I mean, we it's kind of some people are starting to forget that cannabis was not legal until or was not even decriminalized. I mean, it was being decriminalized as early as 1970, I think 73, with the governor of New York at that time was decriminalizing it for medical use, and slowly decriminalizing it. But most people didn't grow up with recreational use. Most people like me had to fly to Amsterdam to see, what was available. That's what I did.
Oh
when
my
I
gosh.
was in, in my college years. And once I even went with my mother, and she was like staying in the hotel, and I was like, hitting all the coffee shops, what they call it,
Oh,
coffee
that's
shops
hilarious.
in
Oh my
Amsterdam. A
gosh.
lot of people don't remember that Amsterdam was only place you could go to
Yeah.
smoke cannabis legally, and you could actually get psilocybin and other things there without too much trouble. It's interesting that we're at that moment now where people are finally starting to have that mind awakening that I think is
Right.
really just caused by the world around us. I mean, when you see the world, what's happening in the world, we need that. We need that mindfulness. We need help with mindfulness, which is, I think,
Yeah.
why Michael Pollan aptly named his book "How to Change Your Mind," because we do need to be changing our minds for the better. And this first step is really just breaking those patterns of thought, those ego patterns of thought that all of us grow up with. I mean, we all grow up thinking we're the center of our own universe. Children think that way. That's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you start to learn that's not the case. There's other people out there that have life experience, and we need to respect them and try and understand their experience. And that, we call empathy. And the ego busting, empathy growing aspect of psychedelics, I think, is what's gotten people really excited, especially people, who are suffering from mental health related problems, which is what Dose is about.
Right, exactly. So tell people a little bit about what they can expect. I mean, I talked about maybe, Black Mirror or whatever, but I suspect this is
Yes.
something its own animal.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what can people, like, if you're seated there and you're going to put this on, it's an hour per episode, correct?
Yeah.
And they're all independent. They stand independently. Is that
Yes, it's an
correct?
anthology. It's an anthology, just like
Right.
a Black Mirror. But it's
Okay,
not
right.
Black Mirror. It is definitely not.
Yeah.
We're not copying Black Mirror.
Mhm.
I reference Black Mirror because I love the show, and I love the fact that every episode you just didn't know what you were gonna get. Right? I mean,
Mhm.
each episode was so different, so unique, so
Yeah.
differently filmed, directed, acted. Everything was just a real variety of
Mhm.
work, and I really love that you didn't know where the stories were going because they were
Right.
so they were rooted in this sort of dystopian future. So
Mhm.
Dose is not so much about a dystopian future; it's more about um, stories about real people, about love and loss, families, um, but I frame a psychedelics, a drug into each of those stories, or I should say, the stories are framed around a psychedelic substance
Okay.
that is currently being studied. So they're not drug movies. You're not going to have a trippy kind of experience, although there is a little bit of that in there. They're really just I'm just trying to tell contemporary stories that kind of use the drug as a framing device or as a launching pad, and then we can learn about them. We can learn
Right.
about what are these things that we're hearing about. What is ketamine? What is MDMA?
Mhm.
What is DMT, ayahuasca? I hear that people are talking about that,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't know. And I deliberately made the show as entertaining as possible so that the average person would find it, fun to watch. So it's got lots of action, it's got drama, it's got love, it's got
Mhm.
all the elements of a great movie or a great TV show, and it's got great characters. Even though each episode is different characters, I'm planning to kind of reintroduce them. It's sort of the repertory model, almost like
Mhm.
a Twilight Zone, the early Twilight Zone,
Yes.
Rod Serling's Twilight Zone had a kind
Right.
of repertory group of actors that would come
I
back
love that.
in
Yeah, for
certain
that builds
roles.
the relationship with the audience as well. It creates that
Yeah,
familiarity and
yeah.
that bond. Yeah. Very
So I'm
good.
already putting together my list of favorite character actors out there that I want to see in this in the series if it when it gets picked up, I should say.
When it gets picked up, exactly. Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I'm an executive producer on Group, the sitcom, which is a series. We just shot the pilot in August, and our star was Aaron Carter, who ended up dying
Oh
unexpectedly.
yeah, sorry to hear
Three
about
weeks. Yeah, it was the last project that he did. So Hulu has a documentary that just came out about him and used our
that.
footage from our pilot. So I know what that's like. Trying to get that out there, and you have the thing is that and I'll say this, in the arts, in Hollywood, it does seem like a lot of the same themes and trends are seen over and over again. I think we've all become a little jaded. We don't see novel things anymore.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Dose is something that caught my eye because I have nothing. I just don't know what to even expect. It seems so exciting because we're talking about psychedelics. We're talking about, maybe, these, when we say Black Mirror or Twilight Zone, you expect some kind of suspense. You expect something that's of the unknown. You're tapping into something that's unknown. So it's just, there's something very sexy about that. And there's something very alluring to that. What kind of response are you getting from this? Are you seeing trepidation because people are like, oh, psychedelics, that's weird? Or are you seeing a lot of intrigue like, wow, this has never been done before? I mean, I can't think of anybody who's doing this particularly.
Mhm. It's interesting because the risk was that the people that were in the medical side of it would look at it and be like, this is nothing like what we do. The other risk being the old, let's call them the old heads or the old hippies from
Yeah.
back in the day that did psychedelics on Haight Street in the 60s.
Yeah.
They might be offended with the sort of pop Hollywood
Sure.
that I'm giving it. But I really feel like those aren't the audience, right? The audience is the person in Des Moines, the person working a 9-to-5 job, a construction worker somewhere who's suffering from PTSD or some medical problem that could be treated with the proper administration medically, and to get people to just talk about it, I think,
Right.
is
Yeah.
really the only goal. And the way to get them to talk about it is to first of all entertain them so that they tell everyone they know, hey,
Yeah.
I just saw this really cool show the other night, you should watch it.
Hmm.
Or we can do like big pharma and take ad space during the
Sure.
Super Bowl,
Yeah.
which is too expensive. So, let's make a TV show.
Let's go
Let's
this
have it
way.
be
Yeah.
entertaining, and
Mhm.
let's just, have a little Trojan horse
Mhm.
and get people talking about it. I want people all over the country, not just in the Midwest, but everywhere,
Mhm.
to be having this conversation because it's long overdue.
Right. So much like psychedelics, you are opening doors into the consciousness to show people possibilities. And what I love about that is, for example, there's so much research out there about psychedelics and the benefits that they can have in certain settings, controlled settings. I mean, everybody has a unique experience. There's no one size fits all. But for example, elderly patients who have taken a single dose of psilocybin have often reported that their fear of death was totally eliminated. That to me alone is something so compelling because what other drug can do something like that? You're tapping into the human experience and you're kind of, and it can be tailor made for the person. And when you think about, like you mentioned, big pharma, think of all of the side effects that a typical big pharma drug would have. I know that everything has side effects, but why they chose to criminalize specific ones and not others, I'm not really certain of. It seems very odd to me.
Well, I mean, historically, the story is long. It's myriad. The story of why, I mean, these substances they're mostly plant based, not all, but their side effect is that they get you to step aside from your own consciousness for a brief period of time and come back with the memory of that, which I think is really humbling because it's very easy to think that you've got it all figured out, and when you're young, you think, well, I'm never gonna die. That's for other people. Like
Right.
so I'm gonna go get on a motorcycle and jump over a wall. So but as you mature, you start to realize, okay, there are certain realities that have to be faced with, and for me, psychedelics opened up that window to understanding that my reality was not the only reality. And I just got to see, just a couple hours of what was there, sort of beyond what I just seen every day. And that was just so humbling to me that I just immediately just knew right away that I had to take a step back and start to think about my own self, how
Right.
I was treating my own self, how I was treating other people. And ironically, it's funny because, people think about drugs as being the gateway to crime and to
Hmm.
vagrancy, and it is, there are links, but they're mostly, you could draw those lines between the criminal justice system and a lot of
Yeah,
the
it's
problems.
much more complex with a lot many
Most
more nuances.
most people that do psychedelics do them in the privacy of their own home.
Right.
They're affluent people. They're the average person isn't doing LSD or MDMA on the street.
Right.
So
Exactly.
so I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of work to be done to just educate ourselves and
Hmm.
educate our hearts and our minds.
Yeah, exactly. I know ayahuasca has been used for many years now for people suffering from PTSD, soldiers, veterans returning back from the war. Have a lot of them have reported to find a lot of abatement of their symptoms. So we're really, but we're just touching on what these things can do. And so I'm so excited that people like yourself, you're starting this dialogue. Like that's what you said. You really are just trying to start a dialogue. You're not
Yeah,
forcing anything on anyone. But
exactly.
what I suspect is that when people who are not exposed to psychedelics or any of the benefits, or maybe they haven't read How to Change Your Mind or whatever, but when they are exposed to dose, I do expect them to start maybe Googling or maybe wanting to read up more about it. And you never know, they could have a mental health situation or a physical health situation and be able to start here and can heal. I mean, so many of these substances have the possibility of healing somebody, and why would we want to block somebody from that potential path forward in their lives?
It's a
So,
lost tradition, really. There's
mhm,
been indigenous people have been using
right.
psychedelics as a rite of passage for people of a certain age, to, basically take a step forward. And so I think we've lost that tradition in a lot of ways. And if you look at really like what are the drugs that are causing the real crisis in this country, it's obviously opioids. It's some of the prescription drugs that are very addictive, that
Well,
can
and
lead
alcohol
to,
too.
and
Yeah. And
alcohol. Alcohol
alcohol
is
is like the biggest offender, by the numbers. It's absolutely
yeah, it just
awful.
doesn't make any sense, why it ended up that way, but it did. And
Hmm.
hopefully the more recreational use. I mean, I know living in New York City, I've seen what I feel is a decline in drunk people on the street, and
That's always
in
good.
recent
That's
in
always
recent
good.
in the last year, like on a Saturday night. I think just because
Hmm.
most people are just smoking cannabis that they get legally, and,
Yeah, because
and
it's legal now here in New York.
yeah, they
Sure.
have a couple drinks with it, and it's the only option of like, oh, let's go out and get blitzed, because it's the weekend, like that. We have another
Right.
option now, which we can do. And recreational cannabis is great. They're starting to figure out the education side of it, educating people to right amount of dosage, what strains work for them, having informed people at the dispensaries. Now
Hmm.
they just need to lower the prices.
They do need to lower the prices.
They're
You,
competing with you. You're still competing with the street dealers, and you can't charge twice. Because
it's
so,
really expensive. Yeah.
people that shouldn't be administering sativa in high doses are still taking sativa, and they get freaked out. They get paranoid. And then they swear off cannabis, and it's like, oh,
Right. And it's like,
you
no,
know
that's not how you're supposed to be doing
you're
it.
not, you're already an uptight person or whatever. You already have stress at work. Don't smoke
Right.
sativa. Smoke
Right. There's so many
indica
different
or
strains and there's,
yeah,
right.
And
Yeah.
so when we have education, it all starts with education. We don't even
Right.
have alcohol education in school. Most people don't know how to drink in moderation because they didn't learn
Right.
it anywhere. So
Yeah, and I love that too. I mean, every substance. I mean, think about sugar. I mean, one of the most deadly substances we have on the planet is sugar. I mean, the ERs are packed with people. I mean, if
oh
you
yeah,
look at just by the numbers,
oh
sugar
yeah,
is so deadly. MSGs, deadly.
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting how people pick and choose what they want to be freaked out by. But I think you just hit the nail on the head, which is just education and also learning what works with your body, what works
Mhm.
with what time of your life. And I know psychedelics, particularly, a lot of people have said, there was a year, like I do it once a year. Like there are people who say, I do psilocybin once a year, or people who say, well, I did psilocybin a few times, or ayahuasca like once and I'm good. Like the memories that it gave me and the
Mhm.
experience that I had actually is enough to last me for years. And I think
Sure.
that's interesting. Can you relate to that, and can you explain
Oh,
maybe
for
why that
sure.
might
Yeah.
be?
For sure. I mean, you know, I think it was Deepak Chopra who, when asked about, how he got into neuroscience, and he said that he had taken LSD when he was young in his early 20s and in the late 60s, and that's all he needed was that one hit
Yeah.
to set him, to set him on his path for studying neuroscience. I mean, there are people that, yeah, they have a practice. There are
Mhm.
people that need or prefer the use to use with a shaman or with a group of
Right.
experienced
Hmm.
people. There's people that just go on solo retreats. I know a lot of people that are artists, musicians, painters, poets, writers. They'll rent a cabin on Airbnb,
Sure. Yeah.
bring shrooms, and do
Hmm.
a heroic dose of shrooms by themselves in a house in the woods. Most
Yeah.
people wouldn't do that, but these are people that need, they need, not that they need, but they're seeking that help that they can
Right.
get from just entering into that mindset and uncovering. One of the episodes that I'm still working on right now for Dose is about a bunch of lawyers that eat cannabis. Actually, they eat pot brownies on accident the night before the big trial, and they have like a moral crisis, but they also start uncovering all these things that they didn't think about during their preparation
Hmm.
for the trial. And
That's
I was just thinking
hilarious.
about this. I was just thinking about this Fox News settlement for like 800
Hmm.
million, and I'm like, oh man, this is perfect timing. Like
This is absolutely
those,
perfect.
those
Yeah.
attorneys, like they were there ready to take down Fox, and they,
This
and
totally ready. That
it's
was hilarious. And I do have a law degree too, and I'll tell you, lawyers love weed, especially in New York. I went
how
to
they
law school
do.
in New York, and then,
Sure.
they love weed, and maybe not during a trial, but even, everyone's different. But that's actually a really funny episode, and I really want to see that.
Yeah, I'm working on all the episodes right now. I have a deck that I'm putting together for industry. I'm here right now in Denver at Series Fest, where we're going to be screening it on Saturday, the May 6th at 5:45 p.m. at the SIA Film Center. So if you're in the Denver area, come check it out. You can get tickets online at seriesfest.com. You can find us there, and yeah, I'm working on all the episodes now, doing outlines and breakdowns. I haven't written every episode,
Mhm.
but we're hoping that a savvy streamer like a Hulu,
Mm-hmm.
I Hulu,
Yep. Like Hulu.
or
Hello, Hulu. We love
or
Hulu.
or whomever
Yeah.
that can get it onto a platform and get it seen by a wide audience. I think it's perfect. It's perfect timing for this message, and the show is super entertaining, and people laugh, they cry, they throw popcorn at the screen. It's a great time.
Well, don't you think that the world is hungering almost in a way for something either spiritual or a deepening of the human character and the human experience? Maybe not religion, but getting in touch with ourselves, being introspective, learning more about what it means to be human, and exploring all the different levels of consciousness. I think that particularly with the internet and coming out of isolation and quarantine, I think people were very isolated. And the guy from the CDC, what was it yesterday, said that loneliness is now an epidemic.
Oh wow,
So,
yeah,
tapping into and that loneliness itself, or feeling isolated, can cause all of these mental health ailments,
sure.
including, and then also physical ailments. So, from the way that I understand psychedelics, or maybe even what you're doing with dose, it's a way of connecting people, because you talked about empathy, and also maybe just like you talked about the guy in, someone in a cabin just by himself, just exploring yourself and connecting with yourself so that we're not feeling all of that isolation and loneliness. I mean, I think that this is probably the perfect time to be exploring these issues.
I think, if it wasn't a problem in terms of isolation before
Yeah.
the pandemic, I think coming out of it was just like tenfold. I mean,
Yeah.
we were, people were already getting addicted to technology, to their phones and social media, like, before pandemic, but
Right.
coming out of it now, it's like, it's really bad situation. I mean, people are everybody's just head down into their phone all the time, everywhere you
Yep.
go. And I think that we really need to be careful, or else we're going to lose that. We're going to lose the ability to really communicate with each other. Most communication is nonverbal. Most communication happens looking into somebody's eyes, reading their body language. And a lot of that is just lost in translation over text and over emails and even over phone calls. Even phone calls are not good ways to really understand what somebody's feeling.
Exactly.
So I one thing I love about the psychedelic experience, whether it's LSD, MDMA, whatever it is you don't want to use your phone when you're in a mystical psychedelic experience. It becomes very uninteresting very soon.
Yeah, that's very boring. You're much more
very
engaged
Instagram and things. Bless you, bless all those things, but they become pretty uninteresting pretty quickly. What does become interesting are the people around you.
Oh yeah,
the stories and what they have to say. The people, and if you're having a shared psychedelic experience, that group of people, it can be revelatory and beautiful, so beautiful. So I think, I'm not saying people have to take psychedelics to reconnect with each other. You can just put your phones away and go for a walk in the park. But we do need to work on that. And there's a lot of elements, there's a lot of themes in Dose that suggest some of those ideas also.
Wow, that is, again, very, very timely. And walk us through Dose RX, because you're doing that simultaneously, correct?
So Dose RX came out of some feedback that I got from some showrunners, show creators that I had by chance, well, not by chance, people I know that I'm working with on other projects, mainly the High Times film I mentioned. So I've been working on a movie about Thomas King Prasad, who was the founder of High Times magazine, and I've been working on that project for 6 years now. Working closely with the family, with the estate, with Tom's sister Judy, and his extended family, who obviously were part of the High Times Corporation for many years. It's now since been sold, but they're still closely involved with it. So I've been working with that family for years because first of all, Tom Prasad was just a fascinating person.
Yes.
But we're currently working on the script. It hasn't been announced yet, but it will be. But I can tell you that one of the producers I've been working with, spoke with him about Dose, about the anthology, and he said, Peter, you got to be careful because anthologies are expensive. Every episode is a different cast, a different location, different costumes, different periods. So you don't have the economy of scale of being able to use the same sets and costumes and things that they do in a running show. But my argument to that was, you don't have to. You also, because you don't have any stars in your cast, you can save money on top of the line by not having to pay salaries for your stars.
Right.
But I took that advice to heart, and I developed a alternative version of the show, which is called Dose RX, and it's sort of a Grey's Anatomy meets Weeds. It's a medical procedural. In the vein of Grey's Anatomy. It's about a doctor who bright young doctor who gets out of school, and she decides rather to go into practice or working at a hospital, she opens a psychedelic clinic, and she starts to specialize in.
Wow.
She turns her focus towards that, much to the dismay of her family and her people in her life.
Right.
And so it's set in the present day. It's about what she's dealing with and trying to treat patients. It's actually set here in Denver, and she's getting flack from the from the federal government, from the street dealers, from big pharma.
Oh,
and
wow.
they're all trying to shut her down, and meanwhile she's just trying to help people and have a normal life and have a relationship. And so that's a fun show.
I love that because you also
framework for that, so that when somebody says
great.
we don't want to do anthologies, they're too expensive, I can say no.
Well, I did this one. I found a way. Well, what I love about that too is it seems like that's going to be an excellent platform to really go deeper into the medical science behind, and really connect the audience to that. People who wouldn't naturally be interested in something like that and say, oh, wow, this is something viable, just trying to normalize it and just enter into the culture. That's what we really need. So you're really one of the forerunners here. Yep.
Well, the MAPS organization, which, MAPS.org, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, headed by Dr. Rick Doblin, who was a maverick. I went to my first MAPS conference in 2010. So 13 years ago, right around the time I was opening Attic Studios in San Jose. I went to a MAPS conference, and I was just blown away by these button-up doctors talking about all this stuff. And I thought, this is cool. It's about time that, and their focus is really on science. So they're really like, okay, in order for this to work, we have to do it legitimate. We have to have these studies, these trials have to be, watertight, and we can't have any errors. And and as soon as something goes wrong, they throw it out and they start all over again, because they don't want anybody to be able to claim that they're just trying to peddle drugs to people, right? So that's not the point of MAPS, and I'm thrilled that they're doing so well. I'm going to give them a little shout out. They're having a conference here in Denver called Psychedelic Science 2023. I think it's June 20th through the 23rd here at the Convention Center in Denver. I plan to attend. We may have an opportunity to the pilot episode of Dose there.
Wow, that would be so exciting.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yes, that's a perfect thing to happen.
Yeah, we're waiting to hear back. But everybody's going to be there. Michael Pollan will be there. Carl Hart will be there. All the leading voices in this trend and in this. In what's happening right now will be there, so I'll be there.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I think is very important when you think about just even the culture or the marketing of it. People nowadays who tend to be into psychedelics, a lot of them are professionals. A lot of them are very careful. They're people who might not have even done recreational drugs early in life. They might have been more of a bookworm type.
Yeah.
So it's a very it's interesting, but it does tend to be a more white collar crowd of people who, therapists and doctors and attorneys.
It's everybody, it's really diverse.
Everybody,
There's everybody now is getting really interested in it. You mentioned it's Wall Street. It's there are
Silicon Valley, a lot of tech
Silicon
bros.
Valley, Wall Street. There's the old heads. Everybody's kind of coming together now and saying, like, where is the sort of Venn diagram? Where did all these things overlap? Where can we find, the right language so we can educate people on dosage, setting. There's a scene in Ghost in the Mushroom where the pilot for Dose that's screening here at Series Fest on Saturday.
I love that title, by the way. I saw that on the website, and I just love that title.
There's a scene in there where we see the young doctor having to go out into the night, into the streets, in the alleys, and trying to find, and she self-administers because that's what you do if you're a doctor. I can't speak for those doctors, but how else can you? I mean, the way that I've spoken to some clinicians and some people at MAPS, and the way that they guard and protect the legal or the forms that they're actually testing in these trials, it's like they're protecting like plutonium or something. Like,
Wow.
it's like they're protecting the world's finest art.
Yeah.
It's like you can just get this stuff, from your street dealer if you know the right person. But again, look, here's I think that the goal, ultimately the goal, educate people,
Yes.
know what to expect, administering the right dose, purity. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Huge thing. I mean, look at the fentanyl crisis.
Exactly.
That's people are buying what they think is cocaine because they've been buying cocaine for
And they
years,
end up in the
and they
hospital
end
or
up
worse. Yeah.
dead because
Yeah.
they ingest the lethal portion of fentanyl is
It's almost, it's like,
it's like 3 grains of
Mhm.
salt.
Yep.
So that needs to stop now. We need to get testing kits out there. We need to just really fast track legalization, or we're not going to have
Exactly.
a lot of these people around for much longer. The opioid crisis is, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. I mean, most people at this point at least know, they either know someone or know someone who knows someone that has been personally impacted by this.
Oh yeah.
So it's very important. And that brings me to my last question, because I really wanted to talk with you about social impact
Mm-hmm.
and why it's so important for you to leverage that. A lot of people get into the different, into the art industries or whatever, or film, and they don't care about any of that. They don't really care about changing, about starting dialogues or whatever. But I know that it said in your bio that you are the son of a refugee from Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm Ukrainian American, so that really spoke to me. And so I'm always very socially conscious, and I always want to make sure that anything I'm working on has some kind of a message or gives a voice or a platform to somebody.
Sure.
Why is that connected with your childhood and with your upbringing, or why is it so important to you to open up conversations about things that really impact the world?
I think that art is really the key to teaching our hearts to learn empathy. I think that is really the key to getting to seeing the other as not being that much other. And for me, the great movies, the great plays, the books I've read growing up, I always felt closer to people after seeing them and reading them. I was an only child, and my mother was a single parent. And so I was, when I was a kid, I used to put all my toys out around the house, and I would photograph them in different tableaus. And that was kind of my earliest ventures in like film, montage. And, but I believe that, when you can cradle somebody in their imagination, they let down their guard, they become almost hypnotized. It's in that hypnotic state of like when you're watching a movie and you're not thinking about your own life, you're watching this light show and it's affecting you. That's when you can introduce some new ideas. And all the great filmmakers do it. One of my favorite filmmakers, Clint Eastwood. I love talking about $1 Million Baby. That's such a great movie. Oscar.
Oh gosh.
It's people went to that movie thinking it's going to be about a boxer, a young girl, the underdog story. And in the end of that movie, it turns out to be something very, very different. And people walk out with a heavy heart, and I think the setup was really, the Trojan horse idea of getting people to relax, to open their minds, and then introducing some idea that maybe they're not familiar with, that they don't even realize is affecting them in some way. It might not affect them right away, maybe years later, but those sort of subtle conditioning that art can do. It can condition us into listening better and just being more human.
Exactly. I mean, think about even the sitcom, which people always laugh at. I know Warhol said it was like the lowest form of art, but the sitcom, All in the Family, Good Times, you were really opening up these dialogues and changing how people viewed other members of the human family. And I think
even if you watch like sitcoms like Friends,
Friends, absolutely.
Friends now, when you watch it now, it has a completely different context than it did 25 years ago. And it makes sense to go back and watch it. It makes sense to go back and watch All in the Family, or to go
Yes.
back and watch the original Twilight Zones, or to watch,
Hmm.
silent films, and to try
Exactly.
and feel and or understand what people were thinking.
Right.
What were they actually thinking and
Hmm.
feeling at that time? If you can do that a little bit,
Hmm.
then you're going to have an easier time imagining what your coworker is thinking, or your business associate, or your mother, or something.
Exactly.
You're going to have more. You're going to be more inclined to listen and allow people to affect you, and then you
Yes.
can be yourself.
Yes, and I think here's my I'm just going to call it. What I think is going to happen with Dose is I think that you're going to have fans of Dose that had never tried psychedelics, had no idea what it was, and they are suddenly going to either be bold enough to want to try it for themselves, or at the very least, no longer sort of have a stigma attached to it in their own consciousness or when they're talking to other people, which in and of itself would be a total win, because right now so many people do feel that there's still a stigma attached. People don't want to talk about it with other people. They think, oh, I'm going to be called a druggie or whatever.
Yeah.
So just even being able to open up the communication and people being allowed to live their authentic lives, and even just say, hey, just imagine being able to walk into the office and say, yeah, I had ayahuasca last night or 2 nights ago or whatever. I don't know. And not have people judging you would be such a positive step forward, I think, in the culture war. That we're trying to fight this culture war of not judging people and allowing people to really find positive paths forward that fit them, instead of us just putting our template on them and trying to sort of malign them or manipulate them into whatever narrative we're being told to buy, right?
Yeah, I think acceptance is really key. I mean, we have to start to really listen to each other, and
Yes.
listen to what the other is saying,
Yes.
and hopefully we can start to repair some of the damage that's been done in recent years. I think it's possible. People are very malleable. They're adaptable.
Hmm.
People
Yeah.
can, I mean, I don't want to say I was arrogant when I was before I took psychedelics, but I played high school football and I was trying to impress everybody. And
Yeah.
once
Hmm.
I took psychedelics, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, who
That's
am
not
I?
the most important thing.
And
Yeah.
I
But
spent a good many years asking myself questions that came up during my early psychedelic experiences. For the record, I'm not suggesting that anybody go out and do psychedelics. They are still illegal. You
mhm.
definitely don't want to buy street drugs, But what we can do is talk to people, talk, vote,
Yeah,
do
change legislation, make it
change
make a
legislation,
more
vote, talk
open
to
society.
bring it up at the dinner table with your family, with
Yes.
your
Hmm.
friends, and let them say what they say. If people still think that there are states. I mean, we just drove here from New York, and there are states where, like, we were driving through some states, and I'm like, you realize we could get body slammed in this state if they catch you with like a little bit of pot. Like,
Right.
fortunately,
Exactly.
we don't carry anything in the car,
Yes, of
but
course. Yeah. Hmm.
but like you can buy legal in one state and you can get body slammed to the pavement in
Yes.
another state for the same. So it
Exactly, for
just
exactly the
doesn't
same
make
thing.
sense, and I'm really interested now and to see what kinds of things are going to be happening with the cannabis industry
Right.
specifically, and how they can diversify the industry, how they can
Hmm.
sort of bring people who were incarcerated and promote them in the industry, give them opportunities. Because some of these people,
Hmm.
Tom Prasad was the first person to publish images of cannabis illegally, and he
Mm.
hired Michael Kennedy, a great attorney, to find ways to protect him. But he could only go for so long, and
Hmm.
his run only lasted 4 years. And High Times lived on, but Tom unfortunately didn't. And
Yeah.
so I think he was probably the first casualty of the war on drugs in a lot of ways. I
Right.
mean,
He for our audience, he committed suicide was he 33? He was very
he
young.
was young. Yeah, he was very young, and it
Um,
was at the height of High Times was the third best selling publication on the newsstands at the
wow.
time under Rolling Stone
Wow.
and People. So there was a definite movement happening, but it was kind of
Mhm.
it was in '78, and it was the birth of punk, and people were starting to change. The disco thing was taking over, and
Yeah. Yeah.
he just couldn't hang in there. So, but movie that's going to be a feature film ideally, and that movie's in the works. I wish I could talk more about it right now, but I
Mhm.
can't. But that movie
We'll
hopefully
have
will
you
be.
back on, hopefully. Maybe you
Yeah,
can come back on when we get closer and you can update us. That would be
yeah.
so
Well,
wonderful.
we're excited about our screening here on Saturday. I'll just
Mhm.
plug it one more time. It is this Saturday. It's part of Series Fest here in Denver. It's at the SIA Film Center. We're screening at 5:45 p.m. Tickets are still available, I do believe, although they are going fast. And yeah, you can catch it this Saturday if you're in the Denver area.
Awesome. And we will have the link there. I'll get that
Yeah.
up there for our audience. And my last question to you is just anyone who wants to support Dose or they want to support
Mhm.
you, what is the best avenue? What's the one click away that they should be going to
So,
first?
the best thing to do right now is just support us on social media. Obviously, you want to view our trailer on YouTube. You want to comment and like on that. You want to go to our Instagram and follow us there. We do have a website where you can read more about the show. It's dosetheseries.com. But I would just tell everyone, if you enjoyed the trailer, tell everyone that you enjoyed it, comment. And we just want to build up more buzz about the show, and hopefully we'll walk away with some awards this week at Series
Oh,
Fest, and we'll have some help of some sales agents, and hopefully one of those Hulu's or
yep.
Netflix or
Netflix,
any network out there.
Disney, Paramount Plus,
Disney.
Apple. We got a lot of them.
Hey, I mean, Disney bought Miramax, so
Oh,
they got
yeah.
some.
Exactly.
They
Well,
got something going on. So
they've got something going on. I'm very optimistic about this because, like I said, it fills a void that is desperately needed right now, and nobody else is doing it. So it kind of ticks all the boxes for when somebody is trying to buy, a series or whatever. I would
yeah,
imagine it would be very successful. And even though it's not Black Mirror, I think even just saying that that's something similar to it, we know how successful Black Mirror has been across the board. I mean, people are just hungry for something that makes them think outside of the box and
yeah,
gets them, not only entertained but also thinking about very interesting things like, Black Mirror. They, artificial intelligence, or what does it mean to be human? These sort of questions, these existential questions, have been dogging humanity forever, and I think this is the
yeah.
right time to start revisiting a lot of that. In a series, and you've done it. So
Thank
everybody
you.
go out and support him, and hopefully we will all have Dose in our living rooms and in one of the platforms very, very soon. And I told Peter, I promised him, this could be a half an hour show. There's just no way to do it. There's so much to talk about with you, Peter.
Sorry,
So
I wasn't watching the clock myself. You
no,
can
I
cut
could
whatever
not
you want.
stop.
I'll cut all my
No,
gibber.
I don't. I am not going to do that at all. But hopefully, we'll even have you back at some point because you are just phenomenal and you're working on so many incredible things. Like I said, I have no idea how you do 24-hour days. It seems like you're doing so much.
It's
Um,
because my girlfriend Katerina, she's vegan, and we eat all
okay,
plant based and
that's what
lots
it
of
is. The energy.
vitamins, B12,
See,
right?
that's
So
the
go plant
energy.
based, people. You'll have a lot more energy, and yeah, thank you,
That's
Katerina.
right. That's right, Katerina. Very, very good. Yes. And I used to be vegan and I should get back to that. So thank you. That's a good
Just
reminder
start
too.
with one day a week and see how you feel.
Yeah. Lots of energy. People always say, and muscle mass. It really helps
For
with
sure.
your muscles too. So thank you, Peter, so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And we'll be seeing you next time. Go follow Peter.